Jerick, why did you leave the tech world for the calling to Christ?
Well, the short answer is that it wasn't my choice. The long answer is that when I was around 11 or 12 years old, I went on this discernment retreat at the minor seminary, which was still open at the time in LA. And so my parents are from the Philippines, super Catholic background, went to Catholic elementary, Catholic high school. At the time, went to church every day because my grandparents would force us, and I was an altar boy and all of that stuff. And then somehow ended up doing that retreat. For whatever reason, I didn't continue and pursue the vocation then. I didn't really have a strong grounding in my faith. And something happened along the way where in high school, I went to an all-boys high school, Salesian high school, and I didn't continue. Also, I left the faith. I left the church for over a decade, and thanks be to God, through a series of experiences, I was brought back, and it was not my intention at all to pursue that. You know, I wanted to get married, have kids. I was making a lot of money. I lived in a great place in Pack Heights, and then I realized that I wasn't happy. By then, I was going to Mass every day, through my own choice. It wasn't like a forced thing or anything. And then something happened, and still I didn't want to do it. And so, kind of like the prophet Jonah, I had my own sort of really wide awake, eye-opening type experience that sort of brought me back. And this is why I'm here. Another way to think about it, I think that I find really easy to grasp for the average person is, I read this really great article on ESPN a couple weeks ago, and it was about this American college basketball player in the 80s who became the number one female basketball player of that year, and she went to Villanova, and then eventually went to go play pro in Japan and was making almost $500,000 in the 80s, which is, you know, an unreal amount of money back then for a female, especially in basketball. But, you know, being an American and being in Japan, she was in this foreign land. She was isolated from her family and everything she was familiar with. And somehow she had an experience and eventually came back, gave up everything, and became a Poor Clare cloistered nun. And I couldn't believe it. Like, this story, this really profound, transformative story, was in one of the most secular things, such as ESPN. And I'm just reading this story, and I'm just utterly amazed at this transformation that has occurred in this woman's life. And so fast forward now, so this article is looking back. She recently celebrated her 25th anniversary, thanks be to God, of being a Poor Clare cloistered nun. And so it's just, you know, going through the history of her life and everything else. And I just found so much connection with her story that, you know, for the average person, it doesn't make sense that someone like her, who had all this success, you know, attractive woman, blah, 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 you know, just disappears from the world. And yet, you know, she's talking about something that she experienced, and she said ultimately what it came down to is that her experience of God was more important than the values of this world. And so for me, it's the same thing, because I totally understood and related. I went to Berkeley, I studied philosophy, and so my idea back then, and sort of the idea of the philosophers, the ancient Greek philosophers, was that, you know, the idea for philosophy, the idea for this life is to find out and discover what a good life is. And related to that strongly is, what's the pursuit of happiness? And so when I experience a lack of happiness pursuing all of the things that the world told me was good, you know, make a lot of money, have a nice apartment, live nice experiences, you know, drive a nice car, all of that stuff, date like hot girls. I found that it wasn't happy, it wasn't satisfying. And so that recognition for me, I don't attribute to myself, because I'm not that special. And so thanks be to God, you know, he had a purpose for me, and all I could do was say yes.